Hi, everybody. I'm James Gorey. Welcome to my podcast at the Banana Republican. You may have got here through the Epic Times or my website, thebananarepublican.com. Either way, welcome. Nice to see you here. Hey, today's broadcast or this podcast is called Planet Hamas. And look, we're 22 months into the Gazan war. What have we learned? What's to be taken away from it at this point? Well, quite a lot, and most of it isn't good. First, let's understand that the whole Palestinian issue, and specifically the narrative of Palestinian liberation that's been driven by Hamas since they took over in 2006 or 7, the October 7th attacks were just the latest version of that. And it's very smart, very clever, very strategic of Hamas. And unfortunately, it won't end when Hamas is driven out of Gaza by the IDF, which looks like it's going to be happening sooner than later. Hard to tell for sure. But as I wrote over a year ago for the Epic Times, the attack was, or maybe I wrote for the Banana Republican. It might have been either. But look, the attack on October 7th was the Kristallnacht of our time. And the Kristallnacht, you may recall, was an event in Nazi Germany in 1938, November, I believe it was, which basically said it made it okay officially to be anti-Semitic. It normalized Jew hatred in Germany, and that was a signal, that paradigm shift in Germany, and the October 7th has signaled a paradigm shift in our world today. It's the most fundamental shift and most fundamental change in the way Israel and Jewish people are viewed by much, if not most, of the world. And that is tragic, and we're just seeing the tip of it, even almost 2 years out. So, number one, let's look at why Hamas did it. Did they do it to defeat the Israeli Defense Force? Hardly. They couldn't do that. So they've done it in such a way, they did what they did in order to draw attention and polarize the Arab world and the whole world, actually, and make them choose sides. Okay, that's what happened, and that's what they did. They said, we can't beat you militarily, but we can certainly beat you in optics, in propaganda, and in the intelligentsia and other parts of the world, and the cultural elites and so forth, because we have plenty of people in there. We have plenty of allies, ideological allies in those areas throughout the West and throughout the Third World. And they're correct. They made that calculation, and it was very, very clever. On the flip side, Israel had not a lot of great options for this in terms of responding to the attack. It's the worst response, the worst attack on the Jewish people since the Nazis. So we'll get into all that, but just understand that even right now, Hamas holds 59 or 50, whatever the number is, of hostages. Maybe 20 are still alive after all this time. And they're drawing out the war as much as they can, because the longer they do that, the smaller the ground that Israel has to stand on in terms of common ground with allies and so forth. It makes it too politically difficult to do so. And regardless of what the BBC says or CNN, or the left media, which are in the pocket, let's be honest, they're in the pocket of Hamas. There are a bunch of Hamas mouthpieces. Nobody mentions the hostages anymore on the left. Almost nobody. They don't care. Okay, they have a whole different agenda. And it isn't 20 remaining Jewish people living in tunnels being held there by the savage Hamas people. Okay, that's not the left's, the media's agenda. It's not what they care about. So, but a lot of people don't know this. I go into a little bit of a background of Hamas. Hamas it came out of the Islamic Brotherhood, which the Brotherhood was founded in Egypt in 1928. And the Islamic Brotherhood was founded as a response to the fall of the Ottoman Empire. So the whole point of the Islamic Brotherhood was to reestablish the caliphate, which had been run by the Ottoman Turks for 600 years. So, and yet, look, once they were founded, they went right into conducting anti-Semitic persecution in Jerusalem, murdering dozens and dozens of people, any chance they got, really. And then in the 30s and the late 30s, they made an alliance with the Nazis. Well, why wouldn't they, right? Why wouldn't they not do that? That's, of course, who their blood brothers are, all puns intended. And the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, the Muslim leader of that era, had several meetings with Hitler. How can we do in the Middle East what you're doing in Europe? And it goes way into that kind of stuff. So the Islamic Brotherhood spawned Hamas and their allegiance and their ideology and the way they feel about Jewish people and Israel. It goes all the way back to the Nazis and beforehand. Okay, that's just who they are. So once you know who they are, okay, and this is, I'm speaking to people who kind of are on the fence or think the Palestinians and Hamas can't be negotiated with. They can't be. They cannot be. And if you saw my piece on 3 things that have to happen for there to be peace on my podcast there, I outline what's going on there. But bottom line is that you can't negotiate with people who want to annihilate you. There's no negotiation. So Israel doesn't have a lot of options. Do they cut a deal with Hamas, get their hostages back, and then kill them? Maybe. That's what Hamas would do. But Israel doesn't do that. Israel does a lot of things. They're not perfect. But they try to be as decent as they can when it comes to women and children and the collateral damage of war, the death of civilians in war. So you may disagree, but I don't know another nation on earth that says, look, get rid of this, empty out this building, leave this building, because we're going to bomb it in 24 hours. And that's what the IDF typically does. So now, look, there's a strange irony going on in the world. It's a bit of a sidebar, but it's interesting. We're having 2 huge shifts in the world right now. Very, very big, very, very important. The first, and this is a sidebar, the first is the phenomena of AI, artificial intelligence, which on the one hand represents the pinnacle of our intellectual capacity and achievement as human beings, okay? It just does. I mean, it's amazing. And guys like Elon Musk and Sam Altman, is it? Or whomever it might be. Anyway, these different AI guys, these AI bros, as they're called, are changing life on Earth, and not for the betterment, I don't think. I think there's going to be a lot of negative outcomes in terms of jobs, in terms of our quality of life and so forth. But, so that's on the one hand, super intellectual achievement. On the other hand, we're also seeing, and it couldn't be more opposite, more visceral, more ironic or base, and that is the triumphant revival of Islam. It's retrograde, anti-intellectual, anti-enlightenment, violence-based religion that seeks to eradicate, which means kill, Jews and Christians throughout the world. It's all over the internet. You can hear them. I can give you a quote later on in this podcast, but they're saying it out loud. They're saying the nasty part out loud. So we have this strange kind of 2 tracks in the world. What's going on? It's very. I think it's very unique. I don't think it's happened before. Maybe it has in the sense of maybe it's kind of coexistent with the rise of Nazism and the rise of atomic power. Those 2 things kind of developed more or less at the same time. So maybe it is not so unique. I think the AI is very unique, but we seem to have these polarity of thought, right? On the one hand, retrograde, primitive Islam, violent, murderous Islam, and on the other hand, this intellectual pursuit. So that's something I think about. I just look at the world in these different ways and see the shifting that's happening here. So the problem is that the rise of Islam obviously in Europe, in the U.S. and North America, in other parts of the world it's not growing in a vacuum. And the first outcome of the rapid expansion of Hamas's influence and ideology is the rapid rise of anti-Semitism on a scale that is unrivaled in the post-World War II world. Unrivaled. Anti-Semitic events, I don't care where you are, South America, North America, Europe, Asia, they're going up 1,000% since October 7th. And I think that October 7th really revealed a lot of people's feelings. And it's inverted the global mentality and the global moral compass, as it were. Instead of being seen as an agent of evil in the world, in many areas of the world, Hamas is viewed and celebrated as a force for good, as a noble defender of people in Gaza, and protecting or fighting against the genocide that Israel is purportedly waging against the Palestinians. I mean, that's the narrative. It's not the truth, but it's the narrative. And unfortunately, Hamas has gained the world's sympathy and support in ways that would have seemed impossible to imagine up to October 6th of 2023. So before the attack, there was sympathy, obviously, and there were pockets and etc. But just it hasn't come down to what it is today. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's entrenched and it's bold, and they think they're the good guys, and that's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. A very, very concerning, disturbing trend. Furthermore, it's clear within the Hamas and Gaza conflict that there are several levels of danger. Obviously, the first level is the danger that Hamas poses to Israel and the Israelis themselves, right? Their policy is the stated destruction of Israel as a state and Israelis, that is Jews, as a people. That's a quote. In a perverse way, it's understandable why Hamas would feel threatened by Israel. Think about it. Israel is the only democracy in the region. It's wealthy, it's liberal, it's multi-religious, multicultural. I mean, all kinds of languages are spoken in Israel. Russian, obviously Spanish, French, Hebrew, Arabic, all kinds of languages. And they pose a threat. Their very existence, their very success, their amazing transformation of the country, of that small country, holds a mirror up to the Muslim nations and shows them just how desperate most of them are and how unsuccessful most of them are. So Israel presents an attractive option to people that have been floundering and suffering under these failed theocratic regimes. Look at Iran, first of all. So Yemen is another great example. So that's how Israel threatens them, besides the fact that it's their hatred and animus towards Israel is driven by the Quran itself. All right, that's just what it is. The Quran instructs Muslims to kill non-believers. That's Jews and Christians both. So that's not controversial. It should be, but it's not. That it's there. Secondly, Hamas poses a threat to Jews everywhere, not just in Israel. There are 15 million Jews worldwide, roughly, and in Europe and America and different places. And Hamas has said we want to kill all the Jews. So that involves a much bigger plan, a much higher level of international coordination and risk and danger. And that should bother people. I don't know why it doesn't, but it should. It bothers me. It should bother you too. So that there we have it. It's Jews, it's Christians, all 1.6 billion Christians they want to annihilate or convert. So either outcome for them is acceptable. So we have this 7th century atrocity-laden religion, ideology / way of life, driving the ideological discussion across the world, across most of the world. And that's staggering. Again, the fact that Hamas has done what it has done to children and babies and women and rapes and the coordination with the Palestinian civilians, quite a lot of them actually, is so reprehensible, and yet is not even mentioned. So that shocks me. It shocks me. It still shocks me, even though I'm watching it happen. And that brings us to the third thing. Look, the third risk is Hamas's plan to establish a worldwide caliphate with Islamic Sharia law applied to all the nations of the earth. Okay. Now, this isn't about. Let me just make a very important caveat here. This is not about demonizing all Islamic people. That's not what I'm doing. That's not what I intend to do. That would be uncalled for, inaccurate, and indecent. I always try to preface it with the Hamas ideology. So it's not about all Muslims. It's about the radical, ultra-violent Muslims that, like Hamas, that are doing what they're doing. So this is what we're seeing. We're seeing a really huge paradigm shift in the world. And I don't know how we're going to kind of get through it intact. In other words, much of the world sees things so differently now, and it doesn't bode well, because it bodes for much larger conflicts between nations and peoples and religions. And that is getting close to getting out of hand. I mean, spreading beyond Israel and spreading into the wider region and into the rest of the world. So the spirit of our times has changed, and October 7th triggered that change. So, but it wasn't just the attacks; it was the reaction, the response to the attacks. I'm talking about the massive media support for the attacks, the academics for support for the attacks, the cultural support for the attacks, whether it's rap singers or actresses or actors or people with a lot of following, and they're citing, they're supporting the Gaza war from Hamas's perspective, and that's just unbelievable. So we are unquestionably living on a different planet than we were on October 6th, and that is planet Hamas. Now, why did they do that? I mean, have you ever asked yourself why they did that? I mean, I mentioned earlier that they did it to get a huge and kind of overreactive, I don't know if you can say it's overreactive, but they did it to get the response that they got from the IDF, from Israel. But why launch the attack in the first place? Why do you want that response? And the reality is that they did that to disrupt and change the trend that was happening in the Middle East just a couple weeks before the attack. 15 days before the attack, on September 22nd, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was presenting his plans about a new Middle East to the United Nations. I watched it. Maybe you didn't, but it was there. His new Middle East was the product of a series of historical peace deals, normalization agreements between Israel and several Islamic nations in and around the region that had been negotiated in the preceding weeks and months and probably years. These normalization agreements weren't changing the entire political and economic identity of every nation in the region, but a lot of them, and signaled the beginning of a new era of cooperation and prosperity between Israel and the Arab world that had been, well, would have been completely unimaginable even a few years before, and is unimaginable now, actually. So that's what happened just prior to the attack. Now, the attack was in its planning stages many, many months before that, but that's what was going on. The new Middle East, with all this cooperation, that's what was going on right before the attack, and the attack obviously changed the trajectory of those plans 180 degrees, no question about it. So, and it's important to note, by the way, that all these diplomatic agreements with Israel, and trade, economic gains, and military help, and intelligence and cybersecurity, were mainly outside of Israel's immediate neighbors. They weren't just, Egypt and Jordan they have their own arrangements, but Syria, Lebanon, Iran, whatever. I mean, those places were Iraq, Iran. Those places were just not working out well. All right, so Israel did what it did. It went outside the immediate vicinity and made a lot of peace with these other countries, and that's what was going on. And it's just huge. And you know what? Here's the thing. A lot of Arab and Islamic nations agreed with the fact that, obviously they agreed, they made the deals with Israel. They said, look, how long does this have to go on? Every deal they get, meaning the Palestinians, they screwed up. In fact, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, known as MBS, among his friends, I guess, publicly said in 2018, 7 years ago, quote, "In the last several decades, the Palestinian leadership has missed one opportunity after the other and rejected all the peace proposals it was given. It is about time the Palestinians take the proposals and agree to come to the negotiating table or shut up and stop complaining." Unquote. That's the Saudi Crown Prince. And he was frustrated with the Palestinians and disrupting the entire region. Okay, so he also went as far as to say, look, Israel has a right to their own land. Okay, that's an acknowledgement by the Saudi Crown Prince that, yeah, Israel has a history in Israel. The Israelis have a history in Israel, rather, okay? They've been there for thousands of years. And the Jews revere the Temple Mount and should be able to pray just as Muslims pray when they face Mecca and then pray, okay? So the Al-Aqsa Mosque, he degraded it in terms of importance because it's not that important. It's like the third or fourth holiest site. So this was going on for years prior to October 7th. This was going on for decades prior to October 7th. Nazi collaboration with radical Islamic groups, refusal to have any kind of peace agreement. Meanwhile, Israel is trying to make peace with the world around it, with the region around it, particularly. Lots of positive things, and all the Palestinians, all Hamas knew to do was to destroy, not build. I mean, have you ever seen one Islamic nation build something on their own accord? It's been a long time. Saudi Arabia's done it, Qatar, but it's a lot of oil money. It's a lot of collaboration with the West. I don't want to go into that too much, but the point being is that there's a lot more destruction coming out of the Islamic world than there are positive building and positive developments, unfortunately. So anyway, look, 1400 years before AD 70, the Jews were in Israel. Okay, so they've been there for 2,000, 3,000 years, and that gives them. I mean, you dig anywhere, you're gonna find stuff from 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago. From King David and other places, other kings and notables in Israeli history. Okay, so that's where that is. That's the backstop to what's going on, and that gives you the context. There is no real solid ground for the Israelis to negotiate on. What solid ground is there? What deal are they going to accept? What treaty is worth the paper it's written on when they put it out there, and you can see their mullahs speaking, and you can see it in their writing and their charter? It's all about destroying the Jews and Israel. So what treaty, what negotiation is worth the paper it's written on? And they're not, and the fact is that fighting would stop in half an hour if the Hamas folks said, look, we're returning all your hostages. We're letting them go. The fighting would stop immediately. Done. But they won't, because that's what they have. They want this to go on as far as they can. They want to destroy the moderate political ground, the moderate political position within the Islamic nations around Israel and in the region, and that's their goal. That's their goal. So anyway, this is what was going on, and this is what's happening. That's the context of Hamas and what's going on. And the bigger picture, though, is that Hamas has been able to manipulate, leverage, and get tremendous amounts of mileage out of the media, out of our elite communication, media, cultural channels. And it's binary. If you're going to support Hamas, then you're against Israel. Okay, if you're going to support what's going on in Gaza in terms of Hamas and their attacks, if you're going to attack Israel, you're pro-Hamas. And so Israel doesn't have a great position right now. Okay, it just doesn't have a great position right now. And the fact is that European media has a history, let's just say that, of anti-Semitism. And Europe has a history of long history of anti-Semitism. And that process isn't difficult to track. So it's much of the third world is not all of it, but much of it is in favor of Hamas. And so most importantly, though, and not most importantly, but most notable here in America is the liberal Jews in America, and I suppose in Europe too. But now they're kind of the October 8th Jews, as they've been called in the past. They realize that the liberal left's silence shows just how deep the left's anti-Semitism goes. It's entrenched, and they've been successful in appropriating the term genocide, even though it's not the case. Any number of casualties they put out, they get quoted, whether it's true or not. Don't get me wrong, too many people died, but that's the goal on one side and not the other. Murder as many of us as you can. We got more, and we're gonna make it very, very difficult for you to make peace in the region, and we're gonna invalidate, delegitimize the whole notion of Israel. That's the goal. And they're comparing the Israelis with Nazis when it's in fact Hamas is the spawn of Nazi collaborators. That's who they are. But that's projection. They're using projection. They're accusing Israel of the same thing that they're doing. It's a common tactic, and it works really, really well, especially with a willing media, a willing base to help promote it. And the thing is that nobody seems to care that Hamas is a bloodthirsty terror group. Nobody cares. At least not enough people care. You watch CNN, MSNBC, all the left channels, it's very, very slanted. And here's the thing. There's even the whole notion. Let's just break this down for a second. Free Palestine. You see that in concerts at Glastonbury. You see that in chants on college campuses. Still today, out in the streets, free Palestine. Let's get real here, okay? The falsity of that battle cry couldn't be more obvious. Right? If Hamas would rule Israel, Palestine, the same way it ruled Gaza, that's a variant of a brutal Sharia-based military dictatorship. Hamas isn't about freedom. There's not going to be any free Palestine. If there were to be a Palestinian state, it would be a hardcore Sharia militarized dictatorship. That's what would happen. This free Palestine is a joke. Anybody who says that is an idiot. Anybody who believes that is a moron. And that's being kind, by the way. There was no free Palestine. There's no Palestine. There's no free Palestine. Was there a free Gaza? Were the people of Gaza free? Yeah, I don't think so. Look what they did with the money. Look what Hamas did with the money. And how free was Palestine? No. It's an oxymoron and an absurdity. Okay, so those things need to be understood. When you watch the news, it's hard to remember those things when you're getting such a blast of a one-sided story. Okay, and those things you need to keep in mind because that's the reality. And the reality is that anything Israel does is bad to the media, to the press, to the pundits, to the analysts, and Hamas is this noble underdog who just happened to cut the heads off of babies and gang rape girls. But we don't want to talk about that anymore, right? We don't want to talk about who these savages really, really are. And that's what's happened. Somehow they've succeeded in swapping the venal evil of Hamas and applying it on Israel. Meanwhile, Israel has 2 million plus Palestinians and Arabs living in Israel and enjoying all the rights, freedoms, and privileges that every Israeli does. Okay, that couldn't be found in any Arab country in the area. So that's just the way it is. That's what has to happen. You have to look at these things from a clear eye, and you have to look at these things with the understanding of what we're really dealing with. And I'm going to quote Mahmoud al-Zahar, a co-founder of Hamas, in a December 2022 video that was translated and published by a watchdog group called MEMRI, M-E-M-R-I. Quote, this is Hamas speaking. We are not talking about liberating our land alone. We believe in what our Prophet Muhammad said. Quote, Allah drew the ends of the world near to one another for my sake, and I have seen its eastern and western ends. The dominion of my nation would reach those ends that have been drawn near me. End quote. Another quote, the entire 510 million square kilometers of planet Earth will come under a system where there is no injustice, no oppression, no Zionism, no treacherous Christianity, and no killings and crimes like those being committed against the Palestinians and against the Arabs in all the Arab countries, in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and in other countries. Okay? That's what they're about. That's what they're about. So when you see these things going on with Israel, the IDF, attacking food groups, Israel has put thousands and thousands and thousands of trucks of aid into Gaza. Hamas grabs them and sells them to the people and keeps them starving and kills people if they try to get them. That's what Hamas does. They kill their own people trying to get that food. Okay, so let's make that crystal clear. You won't see that on CNN. You won't see it anywhere else, but that's what's happening. So the world's support of Hamas, despite its undiluted and sadistic brutality, is the harbinger of this new era we're in. It's defining the new era we're in. And it's exemplified by the widespread presence and embrace of a horribly inverted sense of morality, where brutality is good and defense of democracy and the innocent is evil. This change of heart and conscience, especially in the West, is expressed by an enthusiastic and blind sympathy, I should add, for Hamas, and combined with a callous disregard for the victims of Hamas. That's what's happening. In other words, we're seeing the world, by and large, embrace evil and condemn the good. And such is the spirit of Hamas, and such is the spirit of our time. And that's Planet Hamas. So, lots to think about. If you agree or disagree, let me know. Please give my channel a follow, a subscription rather, and share if you like this kind of content, and like. I appreciate it. All right, thanks so much, and we'll get back to you later.